right, there we go. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you want to go ahead and put in the chat where you're joining us from, that would be wonderful. And we are going to hand this over to Lori.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. To get things going, let's break some ice with a question. Each year on April 22nd, we celebrate the birth of the modern environmental movement. What day is this day called? You have 45 seconds to record your answer in the chat. Each year since April 1970, we've celebrated a very special day. What is that day called? Okay.
Yes.
Right. Well, the doves, there we go. All right. Yes, it is indeed Earth Day, which we'll be celebrating next week for after 52 years. All right, very good. Okay, let's get started on today's program. Next slide, please. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori. I'm the children's librarian at the Felipe de Neve branch of Los Angeles Public Library. Welcome to this week's installment of NeiSci Tuesdays, a program series now in its second year. I'd like to thank the our Library Foundation and our behind-the-scenes staff for helping bring these virtual programs together for you. Next slide, please. Please note that this program will be recorded. By entering, you are, by entering, you are consenting to your likeness possibly appearing in the promotional materials for the Los Angeles Public Library. If you do not wish to have your likeness appear in the recording, please keep your video and/or your sound off. During the presentation, the video and sound will be disabled, but we will enable both features during the Q&A session towards the end of the program. Next slide, please. Okay, here's where I work. The Felipe de Neve branch is a neighborhood science branch, which means that we have neighborhood science kits for patrons to check out and take home. If today's program inspires you to become a more active science partner, please come on by, take a look at these kits and the wonderful books on all aspects of science, all areas of science that we have. And you can also follow us on Instagram. Next slide, please. Okay, on to today's NeiSci program. NeiSci is short for neighborhood science. Neighborhood science has many names. It is most commonly known as citizen science, but it may also be called community science, crowdsourced science, contributory science, or even street science. It is basically research conducted by non-scientists, non-professionals, or ordinary people like you and me. You don't need to be an A student in science or math, nor do you need to have a science background or degree. You just need to have curiosity about the world around you. NeiSci Tuesdays is a weekly program series devoted to learning about and contributing to science and sustainable practices in and for your neighborhood. Next slide, please. This year's NeiSci Tuesdays program series runs from March 22nd to April 26th. If you enjoy our program today, don't forget to check out and register for upcoming programs at lapl.org/NeiSci Tuesdays. And to register, you can simply scan the QR code on the screen here or go to bit.ly/NeiSci Tues as you see on the screen. Next slide, please. Today's program is about pollinators. Pollinators are birds, bats, butterflies, moths, flies, beetles, wasps, small mammals, and bees. They sustain our ecosystems by helping plants reproduce, and their populations are changing due to a loss of feeding and nesting habitats. Today, we will be learning from our two guest speakers about the importance of pollinators in our local environment and how to support pollinator microclimates through creative and diverse plantings of climate appropriate plants. You will also find out how you can help scientists monitor the pollinator population in our communities and contribute to real scientific research with your smartphone. Next slide, please. Now, let's introduce today's presenters. Born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, Elliot Kuhn came into the world of horticulture after a short stint as a high school teacher. Having grown up on microwavable dinners and fast food, he has found that the simple act of nurturing soil and plants to provide sustenance is equally healthy and therapeutic for the mind, body, and spirit. He is the co-owner and cultivator. He's the owner and cultivator of Cottonwood Urban Farm in Panorama City, which is focused on the cross-section of food, community, and education. Caroline Nickerson joins us today all the way from Gainesville, Florida. She is an advisor at SciStarter, and she helps people all around the world find real science they can do. A fun fact about Caroline, she was the grand prize scholarship winner at the Miss Earth USA 2021 program with the platform Citizen Science Empowers Resiliency. So let's welcome our first speaker, Elliot Kuhn. Elliot, all yours.
Hey there, all.
Elliot, we can't hear you. You're muted.
I thought I clicked it and I clicked it back off. Hi, let me start that again. Elliot Kuhn here, Cottonwood Urban Farm. We're sitting here next to our apiary in the middle of the orchard. And I thought no better place to kind of talk about this idea of how do we build climate resilience into our landscapes. And as with all the library things I like to do, I like to start with some of the books that I have at my place that have been informative to me. So this is a cool old school one. It's Introduction to California Plant Life. It's kind of like a field guide. It's really cool to put it in a backpack. And, you know, California, we have so many different microclimates, you know, chaparral and high desert and all this stuff. This is a fantastic book, really, really enjoyable. It's gone on many a hike with me. For the landscaping side of things, California Native Plants for the Garden, and fantastic book, obviously with great photos, but just great educational material on what things will do things in your garden in different climates, different microclimates, and in different ways. And viewing California native something that can be incorporated into formal landscaping, you know, and I don't want to knock non-native species at all. And I think it's really about bringing them together and integrating them together. Sorry, friend in the garden here. And then, of course, last but not least, but the most ideal, the Sunset Western Garden book. Okay, this is a really old copy. The new one's great. It has a lot on native plants and other, but this is essentially like your old school encyclopedia. And goes by plant. Obviously, you got to know your Latin name, but that's easily found now with Google. But it'll tell you everything from its needs, sunshade, water requirements, sort of its growing habits, and then cultivars and different varieties. And then the really cool thing about Sunset Western Garden Handbook, and I think what's applicable for us in learning about these different things, is they've broken down the country into what we have USDA hardiness zones, but Sunset Western Garden Book made their own zones. And it's really, really great because even in LA, we all know up here in the Valley, man, we're, according to them, a zone 18, but we're hot summer, cold winter, very different than if we swung over the hill to Santa Monica. And because of the topography here, we really get that variety in microclimates here in Los Angeles. So any event, always just want to start with that. Oh, my final plug. This will not be at the library, but California Rare Fruit Grower is an amazing group. And if you're all interested in fruit trees and how they can obviously benefit from pollinators, but contribute to habitat, I highly recommend joining this group. It's an amazing group of folks that are so caring and interested in sharing knowledge with each other. So in any event, Here in Los Angeles, we are a Mediterranean climate, right? So in general, we'd characterize it hot, dry summer, cold, wet winter. And that's really found in different parts around the world. So coastal Chile, South Africa, parts of Southern Australia, and even parts of coastal China. But plants from these regions all do really well here. And they're adapted to this seasonal shift that we have of hot, dry summers, cold, wet winters. The other cool thing about here in California, which much like Florida, we have an all year growing season. Okay. Yes, there are seasons and things grow seasonally, but we can grow throughout the entire year. What that means is there's a tremendous amount of forage and stuff that we can present for our pollinators. The cool thing about Mediterranean stuff is we can do that. And once they're established with very minimal resources. So they don't need a lot of compost. They don't need a ton of water once established. But the fact that we can grow all these different plants here means we can really support a diverse pollinator system here. So I'm currently sitting in the shade of an apple tree. And at this property here, we have over 50 fruit trees. So we've got stone fruits like peach, apricot, nectarine, pluots. We've got pomegranates, Pakistan mulberries. We even have subtropicals such as guava, white sapote, avocados, citrus. It's amazing to be in a climate where all of these things grow. And the great thing is they all ripen at different times. So even within peach families, if you go to Dave Wilson, is a fantastic nursery here. So I got my ducks cruising around. They're kind of interested as to why am I sitting here by the bees? If you go to Dave Wilson Nursery, they're the largest fruit tree provider here in the Western US. And they'll give you a great map of ripening times for all the different types of stone fruit that they offer. And what you'll see is through human creativity, we can take a peach and we can take varieties that start ripening in May, like Ava's Pride that we have here, and go all the way to varieties that ripen late in August. What that means on the pollinator side is those flowers are coming out at different times. So I've got peaches in these yards that flower in December and January, really, really early, but it's a great mid-season, cold season forage for the pollinators in this area. And then I've got a late Legrand nectarine that doesn't flower until about late February to early March. So if we start looking at things like that as far as food production, we can really extend the amount of forage that we offer to our pollinators in our garden. If I swing around here, I'm going to attempt to get up and move. We're on a very windy day here. So if by all my audio gets a little wild for you, just let me know. What I wanted to start with, and I'm going to flip around as much as it's nice to have my camera on me. I'm going to start over here. And if I can zoom in here, this is water hyacinth. And this is not a forage as far as pollination, but this is a water source. So water hyacinth is growing in a bucket of water here. And hopefully you can see the hundreds of bees that are using this space to forage for water. So water is a critical part of their journey in doing what they're doing, which is making honey and building their hive. The flowers have created this beautiful thing. They provide nectar, they have beautiful colors and scents, and they have pollen, all of this to attract these bees to come in and do the work of fertilizing their flowers and helping them propagate themselves. But caring for the hives is really important. So we keep 2 beehives just beyond there, and I'll move closer. Hopefully we can see better into it. But we had a problem in losing these hives. They kept losing numbers. They would swarm off and all in all just exhibit strange behavior. What we came to find out was they were foraging a water source from the runoff that goes past our neighborhood. We're in a very urban environment, though we're on a half acre here. We're in the middle of one of the most population dense areas in Los Angeles, major traffic corridor. And so they were taking all that water in the gutter that had all these toxins, well, a very small organism, and it was compromising the hive. So what we started doing is making these water buckets filled with water hyacinth around the yard, and we've got them to forage here now. And I can now report that these hives have been strong and vibrant for over, I think we're just approaching 3 years. So these are feral beehives. You're in European honeybees. And of course, we have hundreds of different types of native bees. I'll try to get my camera in there. European honeybees are just a fantastic workforce. So these are feral hives, meaning that they were found wild. We relocated them here. And they really assure that we in our orchard here get a phenomenal fruit set. So I'm just going to walk through the native plant section here and we'll come back to it. We'll circle back. So this is a really early variety called Ava's Pride, but you can see this tree is now wonderfully filled with early season peaches. So believe it or not, you know, in parts of China, pollution is so bad. In commercial orchards, they pay people to hand pollinate, you know, and by keeping forage here, all of this fruit set has happened by the magic of these bees coming and doing what they do, which is harvesting the pollen. So this is an amazing tree that puts out a tremendous amount of flowering early in the season. If we zoom out here and we see the garden area, this is a very kind of permaculture style garden of mixing native plants in with food production. And what we found is that by maintaining that ecology and not just isolating crops, we really provide the most abundant forage, and a diverse forage is really, really important for pollinators. So there's a great organization that runs the garden here called Black Thumb Farm, and they basically have been building up a native plant berm. So as I mentioned in the beginning with those books, native plants are fantastic because they're adapted to our climate. So right in front of us, we have hummingbird sage, Salvia spathacea, I believe you pronounce it. Always bad with the Latin pronunciation. We've got Salvia mellifera there, black sage. All of these have really deep tap roots. And the beautiful thing is they flower in the times of year when there's not always an abundance of flowers going on. So, and these ones are exceptional for hummingbirds. Man, they really have a deep flower to them, just perfect for them to slide their bills into. And as we swing over here, whole hedgerow of rosemary that flowers a little bit later in the season here. And that's just starting to flower. So this is Salvia apiana, white sage. In the back, we can actually zoom in and we're going to catch a carpenter bee on this purple sage. So I zoom in there. So by integrating this into food production, we see that the pollinators are called to this area. And what I wanted to speak a little bit to, so those are my favorites, white sage, purple sage. This is a pitcher sage, again, one loved by both bees and, if we zoom in here, I'm gonna try to catch a honeybee coming out of this flower maybe. Both bees and, here's a native bee that just landed. So hundreds of native bees, and then the honeybees literally crawl up and into these flowers. So if you're watching some of that happen there, hopefully. I'll flip around for a second. I know the flowers are a little bit better. So consulting books and figuring out what'll work for your microclimate, super important. Above me is the cottonwood tree. This tree produces an insane amount. This is a male tree, an insane amount of pollen seasonally. And you can actually like just hear the buzz of the bees on that tree when it goes through its pollen push. Look, because we're speaking nationally here, look at what works locally and think about both food production and what a native plant species and climate appropriate species. What I would show you, but I don't want to run too much time. If I was to go to the other side of the property, I'd show you a collection of South African plants like grevilleas, leucadendrons. All of these are off season, right? Southern hemisphere. So they flower at a time when we don't typically have flowers, but they are very well adapted to our climate here. The other thing I wanted to talk about is for climate resilience and all of these plantings. If I flip around here, what you'll notice is we heavily mulch our entire lot here. So all of this spread down is wood chips. And this is to preserve moisture. So if I take a stick here and dig down, we don't leave exposed soil here. And what we find is by protecting the soil, we're protecting the plants and the trees, which produces more forage for the pollinators. Really, we have to think about this from the soil up. Plants aren't in isolation and neither are the insects. And so I really think if we bring it back down to the basis of thinking, how do we care for the soil? Then that trickles all the way up to how are we caring for insects and pollinators and food and systems. So here in the valley where temperatures, I grew up here, it's always been hot, but I would say in the last 10 years of gardening here, it's really been amazing to see these spikes. We just went through 90-degree weather, not to exaggerate, but in middle of April, 115 usually in June. So protecting the soil has gone a long way in us being able to produce ample and usable forage for pollinators here. So I'd highly recommend incorporating mulch into your landscaping efforts. Of course, planting natives, food production really key, but learning how to cultivate and care for really beautiful, strong, nutrient-dense soil is a really, really important part. And a simple way to start that is mulching heavily. This entire half acre that you see here, we've mulched everything. And what that does is eliminates weeds, it composts in place, and it allows us to really reduce the amount of water that we have to use. We all know that's a problem here in California and increasingly in other places of the country. So considering this as kind of a full cycle and connection of things working together, I just wanted to kind of dovetail the end of mine in preparation and in kicking it over to Caroline and talking about kind of the science behind all this stuff. But for me, pollinators are very much connected to the soil and to the plant choices that we make. So virtually kicking this over now to Caroline, if possible.
Right. That was very educational. Thank you so much. And I always love the climate of California is such a mystery to me. I've lived in Florida my whole life, so it's always lovely seeing how different regions of the US just look at this time of year. I just think it's really cool. And that's one reason I do love online events like this. They really connect all of us. So I have some slides prepared if Vivian doesn't mind sharing her screen. And Vivian, make sure you share with sound because I have a few videos. I think they're pretty cool. One thing I want to note is this presentation is really for you all. So if you're here live, don't hesitate to ask questions. If you're watching the recording, I'm always available via email, and I want to make sure to address whatever you care about or whatever thoughts come to your mind about this topic. So this is really a dialogue. This is for you. First and foremost, I'm here with SciStarter. SciStarter is a global organization. As you heard in the introduction, citizen science is a really big field. It goes by a lot of different names. Neighborhood science is one, community science is another. SciStarter is any type of that science that anybody anywhere can do. And it's most often by collecting or analyzing data. Data is just information, but we'll get more into that in a second. The main point I wanted to make is SciStarter is for everybody, no matter where you are. And you all are really lucky in Los Angeles because you have one of the best libraries around, and you have so many amazing programs where you can get started in important science that allows you to study things like pollinators. So we'll go to the next slide. I always like to start with this because I think it really brings the point home that even if you don't think that you like science, you probably do. If you like being outside and looking at birds and butterflies, or if you've ever thought about the brain and wish you understood it better, or looked up at the night sky and tried to find a constellation, you're in good company. If you're a curious person who wants to understand the world, there are millions of people just like you who have questions that they want to answer, who look around and they wonder why. We'll go to the next slide. And the great news is there are thousands of scientists that need volunteers. One thing we say at SciStarter is scientists don't have enough eyes, ears, and perspectives to know everything there is to know, to understand everything that needs to be understood, to answer every question that needs to be answered. That's why they need your help. They need curious people like you to go out and help them take pictures, write down their observations, understand the world. It's really a partnership. You come together with these researchers to help solve questions in this big, big world, to help make the world a better place and to just increase our global knowledge. So scientists need your help on different research projects to understand the world. We'll go to the next slide. But one reason that SciStarter exists is sometimes these scientists can't find curious, concerned, and motivated people like yourselves. And people like yourselves, volunteers who are so eager to help, can't find the researchers that need you. So SciStarter is really meant to be that bridge. We'll go to the next slide. SciStarter connects you to real science you can do. And we connect researchers to the volunteer communities that need their help. And we do this through our website, scistarter.org. You can go there and find a project that needs your help right here, right now. You can make a SciStarter account and track the different projects you join across all the different fields of science, everything from astronomy to biodiversity to health to zoology and everything in between. And another way we do this beyond just the website is through programs like this one, because we respect the role that organizations like the Los Angeles Public Library play. We know that they are community leaders, that they understand what their neighborhoods want or what makes their communities curious. So we're able to work with awesome people like Vivian Bird, who I've had the privilege of working with for a few years, to put together programs to connect you to specific projects that address topics you care about, like pollinators. We'll go to the next slide. So what is citizen science? To sum it up in a nutshell, it's a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. Or another way we say it at SciStarter is citizen science allows us to turn our curiosity about the world into real impact. It allows us to follow a set of instructions, to be part of global or local projects, to take down data, to take pictures, to write down what we see, to even conduct analysis, to go through the steps to learn how to analyze an image to help scientists understand a problem. All of these different ways, any way a member of the public meaningfully contributes to the scientific enterprise is citizen science, neighborhood science, community science. It's real science, and you can be a part of it no matter your age or your background or your level of education. We'll go to the next slide. So this is a short video about what SciStarter is. So I'm gonna go ahead and have Vivian press play.
Did you know that people just like you are shaping science and their future through small but important actions? That's right. You don't need a lab coat. You don't need a science degree. We're not talking about kids' chemistry kits or build a rocket activities. We're talking about real science we can do together. How can I do that, you might be wondering? The answer is easy. Become a citizen scientist. Citizen science is all about people like you and me getting involved in things that matter to us, like the environment, our health, oceans, and even space. Science needs more eyes, ears, and perspectives than any single scientist possesses.
Together, we get to make discoveries. We can make a difference by making and sharing our observations, analyzing data, or even playing a game to solve a problem. Want to learn more about citizen science? A movement that's sweeping the globe? You're in the right place. There's a lot of great material here to get you started and help you find, join, and participate in projects through scistarter.org. Visit the SciStarter website to begin exploring the possibilities of scientific participation. And create a personal account to receive project suggestions tailored especially for you. Together with SciStarter, we can all play a part in scientific research that can change the world for the better.
Woo, I love it. And we'll go to the next slide. So that's the main SciStarter website. There are thousands of opportunities for you to contribute to science, for you to do real science. And when you go to SciStarter, you can search them all. And sometimes people get a little overwhelmed by that. They're like, oh my gosh, there's so many projects, there's so many events, there's so many tools. I don't even know where to get started. Well, number one, you're in the right place because you're working with the Los Angeles Public Library to see some of the opportunities they've curated for you. They have all these different neighborhood science kits. They have their NeiSci webinars. They have different projects they spotlight. So you're in a very, very good place in terms of their leadership and their guidance about where to get started. But if you're looking for one particular project, if you just want one singular call to action, I have spotlighted one for you today about pollinators. So we'll go to the next slide. Oh, and before we get to that, I wanted to quickly note that April is Citizen Science Month. So no matter where you are in the world, there are a bunch of different events that people have added to SciStarter for you to discover. There are all these different projects. Basically, citizen science is year-round, but April is a special excuse to celebrate. So if you like what you see tonight and you want to find more global or local opportunities, go to citizensciencemonth.org and there's a lot more in store. We actually have a webinar with NASA tomorrow night, which is going to be a blast. We have another one later this week with different health organizations. So there are lots and lots of cool things that you can find on citizensciencemonth.org. So I wanted to give that a quick plug. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so today's project, you can find it on scistarter.org/education. And the reason I highlighted this page is I have a feeling that some of you might be parents. Even if you're not a parent, if you're just like a person like me who likes to do science, this is still a really cool page because the way it's structured is it's by ascending age level. So there, I mentioned that most citizen science projects are by analyzing or collecting data. Data is just information. Data can be pictures that you take of like a particular plant to say, hey, I found this plant in this particular region. I'm adding it to this project so they can study the geographic distribution of it and see if it's changing over time. Data can also be your analysis. So one project I do a lot is the Stall Catchers project, where you actually analyze videos of mice brains to help Alzheimer's researchers. You annotate those videos and describe what you see. And by doing that analysis, you help these researchers answer questions about Alzheimer's disease. On the scistarter.org/education page, we have a bunch of different types of citizen science projects that require different skills. But one project in particular on that page, the Great Sunflower Project, you're able to do it no matter your age level, because the only thing you really have to know how to do is count. So we have that at the top for a project that could be good to do with the little ones, like pre-K through second grade. If they know how to count, they can do this project. But I do this project all the time, you know, as a 27-year-old. So you can definitely do this project by yourself if you want. But I highlighted this particular page because it's really easy. There are a bunch of different projects on it. You can find the Great Sunflower Project and you can make your SciStarter account on that, all on that page. So if you want to follow along with me, go ahead and go to scistarter.org/education. All right, let's go to the next slide. And here's a little video about the Great Sunflower Project that's embedded on this project's profile on the SciStarter education page. I'll go ahead and have Vivian play it for you.
Did you know that there's a crisis facing pollinators like birds, bats, butterflies, and especially bees? The Great Sunflower Project needs citizen scientists to identify where pollinators are doing well and where they are not. This is important because 1/3 of the food in the U.S. depends on pollinators. It's easy to help. Watch for pollinators on sunflowers or any other flowering plant. First, identify and count the flowers you are monitoring. Count the pollinators you see on the flowers and record the amount of time you watched. Upload your results on a computer or smartphone. Join the thousands of other volunteers across the country who are part of the Great Sunflower Project. You can make a difference.
And that's pretty much it. Seems easy enough, right? So what is the Great Sunflower Project? Well, it's the largest citizen science project focused on pollinators. It has over 100,000 participants. And if you all join up today, it might have a few more. I know it's still, you know, in the afternoon where you are, so it's still daylight and you can get outside, find a flowering plant and start observing it. If you submit your data today, then you have participated in the Great Sunflower Project. You might be wondering, why on earth is it called the Great Sunflower Project if you can participate with any flowering plant? A big reason is historical reasons. It got its start because they mailed out a bunch of a bunch of sunflower seeds across the country. They had people plant them and then monitor those for pollinators. But then they realized, hey, we can get a really good handle on how pollinator populations are doing with any flowering plant. It doesn't have to be a sunflower. It could just be a weed growing out of the sidewalk with flowers on it. So they broadened it, and that's why it is what it is today. The Great Sunflower Project is one of my favorites because I find it quite meditative. I can just sit there for about 5 minutes with my flowering plant and count the number of pollinators like bees and butterflies and birds that visit. And they really make it simple for you. We'll go to the next slide. And why is it important? Why are we participating? Well, 0 is actually a really important data point. Many times I've participated in this project and no bees, butterflies, birds, or any other type of pollinator has visited while I'm doing my observation. So I enter 0 on that data form. And that's really important because this project's helping identify where pollinators are declining. And if we figure out where pollinators are doing well and where they might not be doing as well, we can take action to improve their habitats. And we need pollinators. They help produce more than 1/3 of our food. Or I took this saying from the Great Sunflowers website, bees are responsible for every 3rd bite of food that we eat. The Great Sunflower Project, I'm privileged to say, is a SciStarter affiliate. So whenever you contribute to it, if you have a SciStarter account, then the contributions will show up in your SciStarter dashboard after about a day or so. So it's a really cool project, and it has a very close relationship with SciStarter. We'll go to the next slide. And I included this video because you might be wondering, like, we know pollinators are important. We've heard the words "save the bees" over and over again, but what is pollination anyway? And I found this video and thought it was really helpful, so I'm gonna have Vivian play it for you.
Like all living things, plants reproduce to ensure future generations. But since plants can't move from place to place, they need a way to transfer pollen from one plant to another. Wind is a major pollinator, but it acts unselectively. Insects, on the other hand, pollinate flowers with precision. The bright colors and strong fragrances of flowers attract insects. Once lured to the flowers, insects discover pollen and nectar. Bees, butterflies, and other insects gather pollen and nectar to feed themselves and their young. As insects move from plant to plant, they transfer pollen from one flower to the next. Fertilization occurs and seeds are formed. Over time, flowers have developed colors, smells, and shapes that successfully entice insects. At the same time, insects have developed features and behaviors that make them more effective pollinators.
So that's pollination in a nutshell. If you took nothing else from this video, just know that it allows plants to create the food we eat. And it's done with precision by insects. So you don't have to understand any of the science behind it, by the way, to participate in this project in a meaningful way. If you just follow the steps and submit your data, you're still moving science forward. So I hope that comforts you. If you're like me and science wasn't your best subject in school, you can do citizen science and still be a meaningful part of the scientific enterprise. So how do you participate? You find a flowering plant, like a sunflower. You observe it for 5 or more minutes, and you record all the pollinators that visit, so like bees or butterflies, and then you report that data online. And the Great Sunflower Project makes it really easy for you, and that you can have the form up on your smartphone as you participate. Or if you don't have a smartphone, or perhaps you're participating with folks who don't have one, you can print out the data forms that you find on scistarter.org/education and take them into the field with you. And you can do the Great Sunflower Project in rural areas and urban areas and suburban areas, wherever flowering plants are found, native or non-native, doesn't matter, it just has to have some flowers. We'll go to the next slide. So what type of pollinators might you see? So this is a list of common pollinators. You might find bumblebees, carpenter bees, western honeybees, birds, butterflies, or moths, bats, beetles, flies, wasps. Any creature that can bring pollen from one plant to another is a pollinator. And these are all things that you might record as you're participating in the Great Sunflower Project. Oh, and I wanted to say the Great Sunflower Project is actually based out of a California university. So it's a global project. You can participate anywhere on Earth, wherever flowering plants and pollinators are found. But the data is being analyzed by researchers in California to get a handle on how pollinators are doing worldwide. We'll go to the next slide. And you might be wondering, how on earth do I identify these pollinators? I don't know the difference between like one type of bee and another type of bee. This is a completely separate project. It's called Seek by iNaturalist. But I often use this app to help me identify pollinators, and then I report what those pollinators are to the Great Sunflower Project. This video describes what the Seek app is. You don't have to use it. I just found it to be a helpful guide. I'll let Vivian play this video. the Seek app. It looks like some of you already use it. That's great. If you download this app, it's actually out of the Cal Academy of Sciences. They're the folks who helped create it. If you point at pretty much any plant or animal, it'll identify it for you. And I use it to identify the pollinators that I submit for the Great Sunflower Project. We'll go to the next slide. I wanted to give this a shout out. This is one of the things that you can download on the SciStarter education page. It's a coloring sheet. I also colored it. It was pretty fun. Coloring is very relaxing. If you have younger folks, or just if you want to learn more about the different pollinators that you might see, this is a coloring sheet that SciStarter created as a companion to the Great Sunflower Project. So I wanted to give this resource a shout out, and you can find it on the Great Sunflowers profile on scistarter.org/education. We'll go to the next slide. This is just an image of what your participation could look like. I actually know this family. They're based in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a father and son. And they printed out the data sheet from the SciStarter education page, and then they went outside, found some flowering plants, and started observing them for pollinators. This could be you. It's as simple as this. You can participate today, and you are doing real science by participating. We'll go to the next slide. And why are we doing this? Like, what's the value of citizen science for us, other than just the knowledge that we're moving science forward and helping create knowledge? We're also learning. Whenever I participate in this project, I learn more about what different types of pollinators there are. You also learn soft skills like attention to detail. And it's very rewarding. So by participating in this project, no matter how old you are, or what your background is, or where you are on this earth, you're doing some lifelong learning. We'll go to the next slide. I wanted to give this shout out again. If you take one link away from this presentation today, it's scistarter.org/education, because that's where you can download this coloring sheet, the data sheets, and get some step-by-step instructions to the Great Sunflower Project. I also wanted to give another shout out to Citizen Science Month. If you want to find other cool happenings and events, you can go to citizensciencemonth.org. I know Neighborhood Science has events every Tuesday. So big thank you to Vivian and all of her team for making this happen today. And I'll close up my presentation there.
Oh boy, thank you both, Caroline and Elliot, for such a wonderful, informative presentation. I learned an awful lot about pollinators today, and I can't wait to go home and walk my dog Scotch and see which ones we find this afternoon. And often when I'm sitting on the porch on weekends, that's when I do my bee observations. So thank you both very much. So now it's time for Q&A. We're going to have first some questions that you can ask both Caroline and Elliot if you'd like. You can put them in the chat, or you can use the Q&A button to add your questions there. And then that'll be our lead in to the giveaway that we have today. But does anybody have any questions for our speaker?
I see a question I think Elliot can answer in the Q&A.
Yeah, Vivian, let me read this one. So the question is from Rainy Wood. I live in a condo with a very small balcony. Can you recommend a pollinator friendly plant that I can grow in a container? That's a great question.
Well, I happen to have this flower right here. This is it's a relative of Cuban oregano called Plectranthus, and it's almost like a succulent of sorts, but this little purple flower is one of the bees' favorites in the yard, and it is really easily grown. It can grow in a container, and it's also easily propagated from cuttings. So Plectranthus is the Latin name. It's a large family, but it's related to Cuban oregano, and it's actually one that we have in a bunch of pots here that the bees seem to really, really love. So just because I walked by that and grabbed this flower right now, that's what I'm going to go with as my answer for today.
Very good. Very good. So we have, I see two more questions. I'm going to take a question from my friend Nawal. What's the difference between European honeybees and native bees? We need a bit of bee education here.
I mean, I'm happy to answer it if you want to go, Caroline. I'm sure you can answer it too.
No, so. It's all you. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, in short, European honeybees live in hives, and most native bees are solitary. So that would be the greatest distinction. So, European honeybees, there's a single queen. She'll live for approximately 1.5 to 2 years. And her one job is to lay eggs, and she makes a massive colony. And they're really, really fantastic and robust pollinators, and obviously pretty integral to our food production system at this point. But native pollinators, like, I hope it caught on camera, like there was a native bee landing on the pitcher sage leaf as we were cruising through the garden. They're very important too. And obviously they pollinate in less numbers, being solitary, but the biggest distinction is solitary versus a hive. That would be my answer there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are bats how are bats pollinators? So let's move from the bees to the bats. Caroline, how are bats pollinators?
Well, because they move pollen. That's one really great thing about citizen science. I didn't know much about pollinators before I started doing this project. And just by participating and like using the data sheets from the Great Sunflower Project, I learned that bats are in fact pollinators. Anything that pollinates is a pollinator. You saw in that video that wind can be a pollinator. But these creatures do the pollination much more with much more precision. So yeah, that's why bats are pollinators.
And through their nose, they're proboscis. I mean, is that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but that's another example of why citizen science is great. I don't have to know all the answers to do the project, but I will Google that because I'm curious now too.
Right. And then I have a book here on bats that I'll be highlighting in just a moment. So a question from Cecilia says, I have the Seek app, and if I take a picture of my sticky monkey, it says it's a rosemary. Why?
So that's the problem with machine learning. It's not always perfectly accurate.
Yeah.
Because Seek pulls from the iNaturalist project. So enough people have contributed images of different living things from all around the world that they're able to give their best guess based on their AI, artificial intelligence tools of what you're seeing. But it's not always right. Like one example of Seek failing that I always think about is one of my very good friends lives in Australia. And because so many people have contributed in North America, Seek's pretty much always consistently wrong for her because it doesn't really know the Australian plants. It's pulling from like a North American image database. But that's why it needs more data. The more people who contribute to iNaturalist and help Seek understand what it's seeing, the more accurate it'll be. So it's a tool to help you classify what you're seeing, but it's not perfect.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I see a question from Natalie. Will there be an email follow-up with websites and program information? Yes, and more details in just a few moments. So let's see, anything. Rainey is asking about zombie bees.
There's actually a citizen science project that you can do to help study it. Another California project, even though you can do it anywhere in North America, go California project leaders. If you go to SciStarter and you search zombie watch, you can participate in this project that helps you monitor bees that have been parasitized by the zombie fly. So I'll just let you do the reading on that one yourself. But Zombie Watch is your citizen science resource for that.
Okay. All right. So we have a shout out to zombies this afternoon. Thank you. All right. So Vivian, I think we're going to move on to the giveaway. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. So I'm going to ask one question from the presentation today. And this is how it works. I will ask this gripping question and we'll count to 3 and then ask you to answer. And the answer is by raising your hand and the raise hand function in the menu bar. And we're going to have a bunch of eyes trained on the screen here. So the first person to raise your hand correctly will be rewarded with our grand prize today, which is a sunflower growing kit. So sunflower growing kit. And this is limited to participants in the LA area. So we want to make sure that there are no hands raised on the screen. And here is the question that I've come up with, and I'll ask it. And remember, we're going to count to 3, and then we'll announce the winner. So earlier in the program, Elliot described the climate here in Southern California as hot and dry in the summer and cold and wet in the winter. What is that climate referred to as? How do we characterize that climate? There is an adjective he used, a geographical term to describe the climate here in Southern California. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, hands up.
Lucy.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute her and she will be able to tell us the answer. Go ahead.
Lucy, unmute yourself. It is.
Oh, she typed it in the chat.
It is indeed Mediterranean. Bravo.
Yay.
We live in a Mediterranean climate. So bravo. You will get the sunflower kit for today. And please email Vivian. You see her vbird@lapl.org and with your mailing address, and she will be happy to mail it to you. Now, let's look ahead to next week. Thank you all for participating in this afternoon's program and in this giveaway. And Elliot and Caroline, thank you so very much for joining us today and for sharing your just abundant wealth of knowledge. And we hope that all of you have enjoyed our program and learned a few new things that we can all do for the birds, the bees, butterflies, and other pollinators to help make our neighborhoods more eco-friendly and sustainable for the pollinators among us and for ourselves. Our next, next screen, there we go. Next Tuesday's NeiSci presentation is all about mosquitoes. We'll learn from our speakers about mosquitoes that have made their home in California and here in Los Angeles, and how the changing climate is aiding their spread and what we can do to make our environment less mosquito friendly. You will also find out how to put your selfie skills to work and help NASA identify mosquito larvae that can prevent outbreaks and mosquito-borne disease. This program is suitable for ages 8 and up. If you have not registered for the event, please be sure to do so. Again, you'll see the QR code here and the bit.ly link on the screen. Next slide, please. Okay, so you know, one thing before you leave, we have one more question for you. What is one thing that you learned or discovered from today's program? Just go ahead and type it in the chat. There's lots of things I learned, but what's one thing that you learned today? And Vivian, are you seeing the answers?
No, not yet.
I didn't know that California had an all-year growing season like Florida. I thought we were special, so that's one thing I learned.
Yep.
Well, seems pretty quiet from the chat today. I think everyone is on spring break, so
Right.
that explains.
Before we all depart, wanted to let you know that after today's program, we will indeed be sending you some resources that we talked about today, along with a list of books about bees and other pollinators that you will find at Los Angeles Public Library branches and Central Library. We have books on bats. We have books actually about pollen. And this book talks about how Charles Darwin wondered about how a certain orchid from Madagascar got pollinated because it has a very long, what's known as a nectary, very long. So whose proboscis can get down into the nectary? We have books about bugs in danger and a wonderful new book that's come to the library. What will happen to our world if bees disappeared? So these are just 4 of the many, many books that we have. So Thank you all again very much for joining us on this beautiful blustery Tuesday afternoon. We look forward to seeing you again at other NeiSci Tuesday programs. Enjoy the rest of this afternoon, and so long.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Vivian. Bye,
Thank you,
all.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Thank
all
you,
very,
Elliot.
very much. Bye, Elliot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.